Hi, friends. When I first proposed the fact that I was going to attend a TED talk to my daughter, and I said I'm going to speak about football, she said, "Dad, there's every third person in Calcutta knows more about football than you do, and they won't have much of an audience left. In fact, if it's in the afternoon after they've had their lunch, most people will doze off to sleep." So I took my daughter's advice a little seriously. Then I proposed with a lot of sageness and a lot of wisdom that maybe I'm actually going to speak about the next economic revolution. And sadly, even that was weeded out because my son said, "Dad, if you speak about the next economic revolution, they'll actually think it's an election manifesto before the elections." So even that went out of the window. But crafty as I am and devious as I am, I beat my children. I connected the two. And I said, how can football, or rather to make it even more complex, how can girls and boys playing in the same football team kickstart the next economic revolution? For this, my family had no answer. So my topic is, how can girls and boys playing in the same football team kickstart the world's next economic revolution? And just to wake you up, let me tell you that more girls have been killed in the last century precisely because they were girls than all the men killed in all the battles between 1900 to 2000. Point number 2. We talk of this Asian miracle and we actually believe that it came from some glorified perch where somebody issued a policy, an economic policy, and said, "Go forth and produce." Interestingly, the Asian miracle, the Asian economic miracle, was driven by women. Nimbler fingers, obedient at work, high sense of workplace discipline. As a result, coastal China, 80% of the manufacturing lines, and in the Far East, 70% of the assembly lines have actually been engineered by women. So when you get products made in so-and-so country and made in so-and-so country, and you marvel at that, remember that that revolution came from women. Another interesting point. When men earn, much of their income is expended in tobacco and alcohol. But when women earn, much of those earnings are actually funneled into children's education, books, better nutrition, savings. And as a result, you have something which is described in economics as the girl effect. The girl effect. The girl effect is when you actually take a woman, or rather take a girl, after she's actually past the child age, and you put her into the formal economy, something very interesting begins to happen. 1, she studies a little further. Number 2, she takes the money that she earns and puts it into a little savings. She also takes a little money and educates her brothers and sisters a little better, wears better, starts consuming better, and very importantly, delays her marriage and her child rearing age. So which means when she's physically mature, economically independent, she finally gets married, and that starts the foundation of an equal gender family, of a family where the husband and the wife actually assume they're absolutely equal. This is a fascinating experiment, and some people have actually gone one step further and said, they've actually put a term to women empowerment. They've actually put a financial metric to women's empowerment. And this actually said that of all the investments you can make in the world, the highest return investment that you can make is in women's education. So imagine when we actually recommend stocks and we say 30% CAGR, 20% CAGR, the value that you ascribe to a woman's education and a woman's empowerment is virtually infinite. And effectively, the most potent poverty destroyer in the world is not necessarily an economic policy. It's something as simple as educate a girl, empower a woman. That's what it finally comes down to. I would have said this is very interesting, but so what? It sounds very interesting, but women's empowerment sounds so lofty and it sounds so distant and it sounds so very grandiose, and it sounds something so unattainable, women's empowerment. And finally, one day, one realized that the game isn't only about women's empowerment. In fact, it's actually about something much, much more basic. And what's more basic, and what nobody talks about, is girl empowerment. You expect that there's going to be Merlin the magician, and one fine morning when the woman is 25, she's going to be empowered. It doesn't happen that way. If you don't empower girls, you can't empower women. So how do you empower girls? And I genuinely believe that education represents a foundation. Education represents the bedrock. If you can't empower girls through education, you can't transform their destinies. But, there's an interesting argument here. Most girls have a resistance to studying and staying in school for 7 hours, 8 hours a day. I've spoken to a number of non-government organizations, NGOs, and they've said, education by itself won't work because education is not a compelling reality. But what is compelling is that, remember, when a child is 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, there are two things that work: music and sport. You actually have music and sport supporting the cause of education and bringing those children into school, then the magic starts unfolding there. So I said sport, interesting. So sport I see as an extracurricular activity, actually driving mainstream education. We normally see it in India as mutually exclusive, that if you play, you're not going to be a good student. But in reality, if you have a prudent play on the extracurricular, the magic of education starts unfolding. So, as a curious individual, one would say, what kind of extracurricular? And here is a very interesting thing. The usual Indian response is, for girls especially, Silai Bunai, which is stitching, doing something with the needle, doing some patchwork, helping out at home. These are all seen as cooking, important, but also seen as extracurricular. So in my pursuit of finding out what is the right extracurricular activity by which we can unleash the imagination of a child, I stumbled on something extremely interesting. Most people would have said, computers, this, that, sounds good. But I think the most potent of all extracurricular activities that we have not explored is something as simple as kicking a ball. That's right, football. Hear me out as to why football. One, it's the lowest cost extracurricular activity. You need to buy a ball, and just like me, you don't need to wear anything on your foot. You need to kick. Number two, when you kick a ball as hard as you can, it's a psychological act more than a physical one. It reflects a certain sense of empowerment. Number three, when you stand on a field and see it for its wide, spacious openness, the impact again is clearly psychological. It shows the possibilities of life. Number four, you can't have a successful football team you can't have a successful football performance or a successful football outcome without a good football team. And for a good football team, you need confabulation, you need collaboration, you need coordination, you need to talk, you need to strategize. So collaborative thinking effectively starts as early as the time that a child starts playing football. And lastly, strategic thinking. It's not just about taking a ball and kicking it into the goal. Very seldom happens that way. You need to weave, you need to outmaneuver, you need to think, you need to outthink. So effectively, if I were to put it as simply as possible, football for me is a microcosm of life. Football for me is a platform of life. Football for me is a reality of life that will unfold over the next 60 or 70 years. All the challenges are there on a football field. You explain to a child the wisdom of the decades. You can explain it through the prism of a simple football match. Now that I've explained to you how the mind has worked on football, let me tell you that this is not theory. This is not something that I may have picked up from somewhere and transported into your environment and trying to sell you a theory. This theory has actually been lived. Over the last year, one has had the good fortune of associating with a small group of people, not more than 3 actually, to devise something related to football. It started with something as innocuous as Olympics, in inverted commas, for relatively less privileged children in and around Calcutta. We did this in the month of February 2018. And we had about 650 kids participating. We said, wow, and great. We've given people an opportunity. Now let's relax for the rest of the year. Something curious happened. There was a little surplus left in our account after the tournament was over, after the Olympics was over. So we said, okay, we'll organize a football tournament. See how innocuously things happen in life. So sure enough, in the month of April, we organized a football tournament. And it wasn't a girls' tournament. It was a boys' tournament. Typically chauvinistic and typically blinkered and typically conventional. Boys will play football. Girls' football, it didn't even cross our mind. So we started with a football tournament for boys. We had 8 teams. Went off well. People were happy. We ran the tournament and everyone said, okay, what next? So, we toyed with the idea of doing another football tournament for boys. And that's when the devious and crafty mind came into play once again. And said, if we could have pulled this off well, if we could have got 650 kids from suburban Calcutta to run and compete, helping us host a very successful Olympics event, let's this time raise the benchmark. Let's do a tournament for girls. And we said, मेहनत तो बहुत ज़्यादा करनी नहीं होगी. 8 teams will struggle and we'll get. So we started with an initial plan of 8 teams. But you know how something dramatic very quietly begins to happen. And we ended up with 16 teams. And we said, wow, we've created a market. Girls will play with girls. Until, again, I'm saying, the great things, the great breakthroughs in life happen so subtly, happen so anonymously, happen so noiselessly. During a post-tournament conversation with one of the NGOs, we asked, how is it that your girls play such good football? So they looked at us and they said, because they don't play with girls. Hey, what do you mean? Our girls play with boys. Silence for 60 seconds thereafter. And in that little sentence, little exchange, I think we had seen our road to Damascus. We had seen that this is the future. If their girls could play better football because they played with boys in the same team, as opposed to their girls playing only with girls and boys playing only with boys, I think we saw the makings of something very unusual. And then in the next couple of minutes, they sealed it. You know what they told us? They said, when our girls play in the same team as boys, our girls get better. That's evident. But you know what else? Our boys develop a gender respect. You could have knocked me down with a feather. For 30 years, one has been seeking, how do we get men to respect women? And here in this casual conversation, the representative of the NGO in Calcutta is actually telling us what makes men or boys respect women or girls better. And didn't tell us it was education, didn't tell us it was counseling, didn't tell us it was therapy, didn't tell us it was educational films, but told us something as commonplace and as mundane as football. I think we had seen our vision. So we said, next tournament, no boys tournament, no girls football tournament, mixed tournament. Girls and boys playing in the same team. And as we had done on the previous occasion, we had about 16 teams for girls. We charted out a vision. Get 16 teams of mixed footballers and we'll be absolutely okay. What started as a mission, 16 teams, eventually ended with 48 teams. In December 2018, 48 teams. We could have gone and prospected these teams from Calcutta begging, please team de dijiye, please team de dijiye. You know what actually happened? Teams came from as far as 25 kilometers of the Myanmar border. When they came, there were 336 players who participated in the tournament. And one of the most amazing memories, one of the most indelible memories, one of the most enduring memories is children coming from Myanmar, near the Myanmar border, Manipur. And one of the first questions they asked when they were told that there was this tournament was they said, how will we go? Somebody said, there's a train. So they said, and I think it's important for all of you to hear, they said, but what is a train? In Manipur, they had never seen a train. They commuted to Calcutta and back across 144 hours, in which I could have possibly made a trip to San Francisco and back 7 times. When the kids came to Calcutta, they couldn't understand the concept of a road on top of another road. They couldn't understand the concept of crossing a road. They couldn't understand the size of, how could you have a train which is below the ground? Will it not have an accident? Here in Calcutta, we think we know everything. We are the center of our own universe. But imagine catering to a Manipuri team where the players actually come to Calcutta and say, but how does, if I just want to cross the road like this, will it not be a problem? I'll give you another instance. We thought the tournament was about football. We also started believing that, we are doing a great service to football. And look where we eventually ended. There's a little pocket in Bengal where they banned the footballers from playing. So one of the teams came saying, we haven't practiced. So why haven't you practiced? So the answer was, because they forbade us from practicing. So what do you mean forbade you from practicing? They said, but when we started practicing last month, they confiscated our football. So why did they confiscate your football? They said they confiscated our football because they wanted to exploit us for labor. And because we have a football team, and because there are 8 of us, 10 of us, 15 of us, 20 of us playing football, they see it as an organized activity which could have very dangerous economic consequences in the region. So they forbade us from playing football. So the football was confiscated. And I would have said, football confiscated is a small price to pay. What actually happened was school was vandalized. One of the kids, 13 years old, was sent to a Berhampur correctional home for 13 days, during which the child couldn't speak to his mother. And we thought we were running a football tournament. So what actually happened was that football became not a sport, not the subject of a tournament. Football became a prism, a screen through which we were seeing life. We couldn't have seen what was happening in the interiors of Bengal or Northeast if it hadn't been for football. So when the footballers came to Calcutta, we responded with an equal spirit, a commensurate spirit. We said, this tournament is not about football. So what did we do? We took the children to the largest software facility in Calcutta, employing 45,000 people. And we showed them, look, this is what your education can do for you. This is where you can go if you actually study better. We took them to Eco Park. We had arranged a dance party for them. We got one of the better mind trainers of Calcutta to engage with them and tell them how they can become fitter mentally and physically. This wasn't then just a football tournament. It was a movement. And I will use the word, it was a jihad against all the inequities that happen in rural and semi-urban India. So the big question is, now what? The tournament is already over. So I could tell you that, okay, I think the next big thing is that what if India, and we all get various people involved, and have a tournament for 5,000 teams, pan-India. The objective again is not football. The objective is very clearly, what our goal? Our goal is a day, वो सुबह, और वो सुबह जो शायद कभी आएगी, when they ask you, who is the head of your family, you actually put down your mother's name. Our objective is that day, when they ask you, what is your middle name, you don't instinctively put down your father's name, but put down your mother's name. Our objective is that particular day, when we get married to somebody, we don't, and I speak from my gender, I don't expect the woman I'm getting married to relinquish her surname, but instead, not only retain her surname, but perhaps a day when I contribute my surname to her name and she contributes her surname to my name. I think football again is a prism. You might say, sitting there in the audience, that this man is talking beyond his brief. But remember, next economic revolution or next economic upgradation or the next economic movement, and football. Girls and boys playing in the same team. girls and boys enhancing the mutual confidence may sound very unrelated to you. But let me remind you, 1930, a 61-year-old man bent down on a coast in Gujarat, picked up a fistful of salt, and that marked the beginning and the end of the mightiest empire on earth. Effectively, when you take two extremely disparate realities, football and the next economic revolution are completely disparate realities. But if you take them, my understanding is it represents the foundation of something whose echo and whose impact will not be measured in years, will not be measured in decades, will be measured in centuries. You sitting there may actually call me a dreamer, but I'm also convinced that after this presentation of mine, I won't only be the one. Thank you.